Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing another tier ranking video. And I'm very excited about this one because I originally saw this idea over on Kayla's channel, Books and Lala. She did this video where she tier ranked a whole bunch of different things in one video, but one of the ones in particular that she did that I thought was really cool was she tier ranked all of the books that she had read that were favorites from previous years, and then she ranked them like saying like, do I still stand by those or do I take it back, and things like that. So I thought that would be fun for me to try and do. So these are all going to be books that I read from the years 2014 to 2017 because I'm not going to include any from 2018 or 2019 on here because I feel like those are too recent that like I hope I still feel the same about those books if it was just recent within these last few years. But I feel like since the years of 2014 to 2017 I do feel like my reading preferences have changed quite a bit since, and 2014 was like the first year that I really actively became a reader again. And I know I technically started my channel in 2015, so I don't really have a favorites of 2014 video to be going off of, but I'm just going to be showing some of the books that probably would have ended up in my favorites of 2014 video if I had made one then. Yeah, I just thought this would be a super fun tier ranking video kind of thing to do. So alright, so if you see here I have the 5 different tiers. The top one is going to be all-time favorite, so this just means that I still stand by this book. It's still one of my all-time favorites and I 100% do not regret putting this book in my favorites. The next one says I stand by it, which means that I stand by why I put that book in my favorite for that year, and maybe it is still like something that I enjoyed, but I wouldn't consider this book an all-time favorite. Like, it's not one of the first books that comes to mind when I think of my all-time favorite books. And then the next one says need to reread, because honestly some of these books are from like, you know, 2014. It's been like 6 years since I read these books, so some of them I feel like I would need to reread it to validate the fact that this is a favorite, or, you know, figure out that it's not a favorite. And then the next one is I take it back, which, you know, just means like I don't really consider this book a favorite anymore, and I don't know why I would put it in my favorites video. And then the last one says what the fuck was I thinking, because some of these it's like I only put it in my favorites video maybe because it was like super popular at the time and I personally didn't even really enjoy it that much, but I was just trying to be like a cool kid, you know. So the very first book I have on this list is Cinder, which, if you didn't know, I was a massive fan of the Lunar Chronicles. That was probably the only like fantasy kind of thing that I was into. So I would put this in stand by it, but I also do feel like I need to reread this series because it has been so long. But I was so obsessed with this series. I got my sister to read this entire book series. Like, when has that ever happened ever? The next one is The Program by Susan Young. This was also one that I read back in 2014, so it's been a while, but I want to say that I stand by this, even though I also do feel like I need to reread this one. But this one was like a really cool young adult book about how like suicide has become an epidemic and how they're trying to like wipe the memories of teenagers in order to prevent them from committing suicide. I don't know, it's crazy. I don't know, it's a totally wild book, and I just remember really enjoying it and bawling my eyes out, and I read like this entire book series, so I do think I would stand by this. Oh my gosh, next up is Aristotle and Dante, which 100% this is still an all-time favorite. This was actually the first book that I ever reviewed on my Bookstagram when I made my Bookstagram back in like June 2014, I want to say. So this book has been around for a very long time for me, and I just love this book so much. I've reread it a few times and I adore it with my entire body, and it's still an all-time favorite. Next up is Divergent, which I feel like, I don't know, I feel like this is one of those books where I only read it because it was really popular and everybody was reading young adult dystopian back in those days. And I'm not really a huge fan of young adult dystopian, but Divergent is probably the only one that I actually genuinely enjoyed out of all of them. So I feel like it needs to go in need to reread, because I don't know if I would feel the same about Divergent if I read it now, but I just remember loving it so much back in 2014, so I feel like I just need to reread that one. Next up is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. This one is definitely still an all-time favorite. Victor Vale and Eli Ever have made such an impression on my life and my heart. And the second book, Vengeful, was just as fun. Like, I love this series so much. And Vicious is definitely one of the most underrated books of all time in my opinion. Like, that book is freaking fantastic. Next up we have Shadowlands, which I would put this one in need to reread because this one was like a thriller kind of like young adult book, but it also had some like spooky Paranormal Island vibes to it, and I remember just loving this shit. I remember eating that shit up, but I honestly can barely vaguely remember anything about the plot. I just know it was like her teacher was like stalking her or something. I don't know. It was really cool. I feel like I need to reread it though. And then we have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which this is definitely still an all-time favorite. I talk about this book all the time, so you probably know. Kath is like one of my most relatable characters of all time, and this book will always have a special place in my heart. I love it so dearly. So The Fifth Wave is another one of those books that I think I only read it and like loved it because of all the hype, you know? I feel like I would put this one in I Take It Back, but also almost like what the fuck was I thinking, but maybe not, because I mean, I do enjoy the genre of like sci-fi and aliens, like that's still something I do really enjoy, but the fact that it's kind of like a young adult, like apocalyptic kind of book, and it's like with a love triangle, like kind of cheesy, like I don't know, I don't think I would enjoy it if I read it now. And then the next one is Unteachable by Leah Rader. This author now goes by Elliot Wake, and I don't know how I feel about this book. I first read this book in 2014. It was like one of my favorite books that I've ever read in my whole freaking life. And then I reread this book again in 2019, and it ended up only being like a 3-star book for me. So like, I don't know. I feel like I kind of want to take it back, because I feel like I loved this one so much when I had just been getting into romance and I hadn't read a whole lot of romance yet. But I feel like since reading this book, I feel like I've read romance that I've enjoyed a lot more, and I feel like it wouldn't have been in my favorites if I had read those other said romances, you know? Like for example, this next one, Loving Mr. Daniels by Brittany C. Cherry. Holy shit, all-time favorite, so good. That one's like a student-teacher romance, but it's like heartbreaking and beautiful. And then we have The Maze Runner, which also, this one I feel like I would put I Take It Back, because it's just another one of those books that I read it because it was super popular at the time and all that, but I don't think I would enjoy The Maze Runner that much if I read it now. I mean, the movies are still pretty good, but I don't know. I just don't, it's just not my thing, you know? It's not my genre. I was only reading that to try and like understand the hype when I was younger. And then we have Gone Girl, which we all know is still an all-time favorite of mine. It is the book that I credit to getting me into reading in the first place. And then Monster Calls. Monster Calls is definitely still an all-time favorite for me. I've also reread that book. Loved it so much. And then After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is also one that I consider to be an all-time favorite. Taylor Jenkins Reid is... most of her books are chef's kiss. There's a few in there that I just thought were okay, but After I Do is exceptional. And then we have Atheists Who Kneel and Pray, which this is another one of those books that after I reread it the second time, I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the first time around. But I feel like I would still stand by it because I can still recognize what I loved so much about it the first time I read it, but the second time around it just wasn't as fun. And then we have Attachments by Rainbow Rowell, which this one I feel like I would need to reread because I read this book on my 20th birthday in 2015, and I just thought it was the most adorable, soft, like 90s thing ever. But since reading that book, it's been brought to my attention a lot that people find this book super like creepy and stalker-like and problematic, and I just don't think I was paying attention to those things when I first read this book in 2015. So I feel like I need to reread that one, and I'm really curious to reread that one to see if my feelings about it have changed. Ooh, and then Autobiography by Christina Lauren. This is definitely still an all-time favorite. And then Bad Mommy by Taryn Fisher. I would definitely stand by this one. I don't know if Bad Mommy is like an all-time favorite for me, but I freaking loved this book. It's like a thriller from Taryn Fisher. It was just so much fun to read about. And then Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. I feel like this is one that I need to reread again because this was actually my #1 favorite book of 2015. But since reading this book, I have really disliked a lot of books from Renee Carlino ever since reading that book. So I feel like I need to reread that book just to validate the fact that like it is what I thought it was, you know? Like, did I really like Before We Were Strangers that much? Or like, I don't know. I need to reread that one. And then Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough is still an all-time favorite of mine. It's like one of my favorite book endings ever. One of the best plot twists and thriller, I think. I love it so much. And then same with The Butterfly Project by Emma Scott. This is an all-time favorite for sure because it takes place in New York and the characters Beckett and Zelda are just like, they're so freaking cute. They're so cute. And then we have Dangerous Girls, which, I don't know, I feel like I do need to reread this one, but I also think I would put it in I Take It Back because I don't really remember a whole lot about this book, and it's a young adult thriller, so I usually don't typically like young adult thrillers very much, and there's literally nothing from this book that stands out to me over the years. Like usually if it's been like years and years since I've read a book and I consider it a favorite, I can still recall things about the plot, but this one I literally have no idea. Like I don't remember anything. And then we have Dark Inside. I read this one very early in 2014 when I was still figuring out my reading taste, and I feel like I need to put this one, what the fuck was I thinking, because I feel like it was one of those things where I think I gave this book 5 stars when I first read it, but I feel like it was so early on in my reading life that I would like give any book that I finished 5 stars. Like, woo, I finished it, 5 stars, that was great, that was so fun. But like, was it actually even good though? I don't know. And then we have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which this is still an all-time favorite, one of my favorite books ever, ever, ever. And then Egomaniac, I would put Stand By It, because this book isn't one that I consider to be like an all-time favorite, but it is one that I still have very happy, strong feelings about, and I think it's a really, really adorable romance. And it's like an office romance. It kind of reminds me of like The Hating Game, but just not as great. And then we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Like, do I even need to say? Like, duh, it's an all-time favorite. It's one of my freaking favorite books of all time, like definitely up there. And then we have From This Moment, which I would put Need to Reread for this one, because this one was a romance that I really, really enjoyed, but it's just been so long I don't remember like everything about it. But it's about this girl who her husband dies, and then she like starts to get with his twin brother who's like coming back, and yeah, it's just, it's so forbidden and it's so good, I thought, but I feel like I do need to reread this one. And then we have Full Tilt by Emma Scott, which this one I would put Stand By It, because it's not like an all-time favorite like some of my other Emma Scott books, but it is still something that I think is really beautiful and really heartbreaking, and it's like a really solid romance still. And then He Will Be My Ruin by K.A. Tucker. I would also put this one in Stand By It, but I do feel like I need to reread that one too because it's been so long. But that's one of the only like thriller and romance books I remember enjoying, because it's kind of like a sexy thriller because there's like a love triangle, but it's still a thriller because her best friend killed herself, but like, did she though? But I had a lot of fun reading He Will Be My Ruin, and I recall really, really loving it, so I think I would stand by it. And then we have Heels Over Head by Elise Springer. This one's definitely an all-time favorite. That one's like a male-male romance, and it's about like the Olympics. It's like these two divers, and it's so freaking good. It's so underrated in my opinion. And then Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson. I would put this in Stand By It because it's not like one of my favorite Peter Swanson books, but it's still like something that I remember loving so much, and I don't really understand why everybody else seems to like hate this book. But I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was like a pretty solid thriller. And then we have Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. This is definitely going in all-time favorites. I Am Trash for Jamie and Wes. And then we have Ignite Me by Tahira Mafi, which this is another one of those that I feel like I only read this series because it was popular back then. So I feel like I would put I Take It Back because I do need to reread it, I guess, to justify my feelings towards it, but I also don't really want to. So yeah. And then we have I'll Meet You There by Heather Demetrios, and this is one that I would put I Stand By It because this is like one of the only young adult contemporary novels that really like got to me, and I still own this book after all these years. Like I haven't been able to let go of it, and I actually did a full book talk for it on this channel, so like I still stand by it. It's not an all-time favorite, but I loved it so much. Oh my gosh. And then we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is definitely easily an all-time favorite. I love Lily. This book made me cry a whole lot. And then we have Junkie by Cambria Hebert, which this is definitely still an all-time favorite for me. Love, love, love this one. And then maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. I feel like I would need to reread this one because I remember really enjoying it when I first read it, but now that I've had more of like a defined taste in romance books, I don't know if I would enjoy this one as much the second time around, especially because this one does involve some like cheating, which, you know, in some cases I'm okay with, but in most cases I'm just not. Like, it's just like, ugh. So I'd be curious to see my thoughts if I decided to reread this one. And then maybe In Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid I would put as an all-time favorite because I love that book so much, and I feel like that's one of her best. And then we have Night Film by Marisha Pestle, and I think I would put Stand By It for this one because I don't know if I consider Night Film to be like an all-time favorite thriller for me, but Night Film was so freaking good, and it still is so strong in my memory even though I read it way back in 2015. But like the imagery and the scenes in this book still are so clear in my brain, so definitely still stand by this one. Alright, next up is November 9, and I feel like this would be one I also need to reread because apparently, you know, like when I first read this book, I thought it was just like a super cute romance. And then since reading this book, it has also been brought to my attention that this one is like super problematic and kind of weird, I guess. And I don't know, I feel like I do need to reread this one because I just wasn't looking for those things in 2015 or whenever the year it was that I first read this book. And then we have One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which this is also still an all-time favorite book for me. I think the only Taylor Jenkins Reid books that wouldn't be all-time favorites for me is Forever Interrupted and Daisy Jones and the Six, but everything else from her I have like loved so much. And then we have Since You've Been Gone by Morgan Matson. I feel like for this one I would stand by it because this one's like a really cute young adult contemporary novel, and I really love novels that kind of like follow a checklist of like things they have to do for the summer and like completing those things. I don't know, I think it's a super fun trope to read about. So I enjoyed that one. And then we have Skyscraping by Cordelia Jensen, which this is also one I would put that I stand by it because this was another really cute young adult contemporary novel that takes place in like the 90s in New York, and it's about this young girl finding out that her dad is gay and that he has HIV. Alright, the next one is Thanks for the Trouble by Tommy Wallich, which this is another one that I feel like I need to reread because I just remember enjoying this one so freaking much. I think I did read it during the booktube-a-thon a few years ago and I loved it like a lot, but I just don't really remember a whole lot of it now. Like I'm having trouble recalling a lot of this story, but I do remember it's about this young girl who like has the ability to live forever, like she's immortal, and then it's kind of about her starting this friendship with this guy Parker who's our main character. But honestly, besides that, I don't remember a whole lot about this book, so I just need to reread it. And then we have The Deal by Elle Kennedy, which this is one of my favorite romances of all time, so it's going in all-time faves. And The Deal, like the whole series, it just makes me so happy. Like all four of the books are pretty good. I think the first one is definitely my favorite though, but I enjoyed all of them, and I think Elle Kennedy is such a great romance writer. And then The Gravity of Us by Brittany C. Cherry, oh my gosh. This one is definitely still an all-time favorite as well, and I think this one might be my favorite Brittany C. Cherry. I don't know, I'd have to think about it, but this one or Loving Mr. Daniels I think are my favorite from Brittany C. Cherry. Oh, so good. And then we have The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, which, holy crap, this one is definitely an all-time favorite. That book is still one that I think about to this day, and that one has really like affected me. And then we have The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, which this is another all-time favorite romance for me. I mentioned it earlier. The Hating Game is just one of the best hate-to-love romances of all time, in my opinion. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I love Josh and Lucy so much. They're just so cute. And then we have The Martian by Andy Weir, which I would put stand by it for this one because I don't consider The Martian to be like one of my favorite books of all time, but I did really enjoy it while I read it. I do think it's a little too dense, you know, for me, for my taste personally, but I still stand by it because I really did enjoy this book when I first read it. And then we have The Sun Is Also a Star, which I would still put this one in, I think I would put this one in all-time favorite because I really loved the way that this book was written, and even though I usually don't like insta-love, this is like the only book that I've read that made me think insta-love is okay, and that made me like believe in it all, you know, because this book was just written so well. It was so cute. And then we have Tonight the Streets Are Ours, which I'm gonna put this one in like what the fuck was I thinking, because I don't even remember this book. I think there's like a road trip in it and it's about like an online relationship, like somebody's getting catfished or something. I literally don't remember anything about this book, and I don't know why I would have considered this book an all-time favorite. Like I literally don't even know. And then I have The Unexpected Everything, which I would put this in I Take It Back because I literally only put this book in my favorites because I loved Clark so much, which was her love interest in this book. So it's not like I really enjoyed this book as a whole. It was like I just really enjoyed her love interest Clark, and for me that's not enough of a reason to consider a book a favorite, at least not anymore, I guess. And then we have We're the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson, which, you know, we all know this is an all-time favorite for me. I love We're the Ants. It honestly like changed my whole freaking life. And then we have Winter by Marissa Meyer, which this one, I'm gonna put this in Stand By It as well because I think this Lunar Chronicles series, like Cinder and Winter, I stand by that. I really enjoyed these books when I first read them. And then lastly we have You by Caroline Kepnes, which this is definitely an all-time favorite thriller of mine. I've reread this book and I'm pretty obsessed with the show too, not gonna lie, but there's something about this book. I just love reading from Joe Goldberg's point of view. It's just so entertaining. There's nothing like it. Alright, so that pretty much concludes this tier ranking video. Please let me know your thoughts if you've read any of these books. Do you also consider them to be favorites of all time, or do you have any favorites that you would take back personally? I think it's really fun to like go over your favorite books from the last few years and just kind of like see how your feelings have changed about things, or to see books that you might have put in your favorites list that you might have not even wanted to pick up now, you know what I mean? I definitely have a few of those where it's like, who was I in 2014? I don't know her. Thank you so much for watching as always, and if you have any other like fun tier ranking kind of videos that you would like to see me do, then please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye. What are we fighting for? I can't